Welcome everybody to Power Connection Chat for my live stream. My name is Umar, and I'm happy to have you guys join us today. So today, you got like my little cover image there. It was kind of for the whole Power Connection Chat. That's why I had it there. So let me just put this a little bit back here and get this set up for our broadcast today. Hope you guys are doing well. And today's brought to you by letter B. And I can see everybody. Okay, excellent. All right, so everyone's here. So Gina's here, and Murtaza's here, eBay's here. Welcome. So we're going to talk about today. This is the Power Connection broadcast, and basically I'm here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday around 8:45 a.m. to talk about issues around employee engagement, personal development, leadership, career development, public speaking, and things like that. So thanks so much for joining us. If you are joining us for the first time, or even for visiting for a second time, number one, comment below. Let us know exactly where you're from. So are you calling in from North America, South America, Australia, Africa, Europe, Asia? Let us know. I'd love to kind of hear from you about that. Number two, if you like what you're hearing, by all means, tap, love, heart, smiley face, all those kinds of nice little things that get people kind of excited about what we're talking about, which is great. And then number three, you certainly can ask questions on the feed about what I'm going to talk about. You can also ask questions with other people on the feed. You can talk to people on the feed, tag people and get people to join the conversation. And if you really like this post, share us on your page and let people know what it's all about. So today we're going to talk about managing your manager. So basically the good, the bad, and the ugly of dealing with managers. Now, but I want to talk about both. I want to talk about good managers. I want to talk about bad managers. And how do you identify them and how do you deal with them? And I thought I'd start by sharing some stories of some of the managers I've had and to give you some insights into there. All right, so does that sound good? Other people, and it looks like people are joining us. Hello, Nashiket, good to see you. Murtaza, Gina, it's great. Lots of people joining us. That's great. So I'm glad to have you all here. And so let's get right into it right now. So let's start off with a story around my managers, the ones that I've had that both good and bad. And I can tell you that I've had good managers and had bad managers. But let's start off with the bad managers. So way back in the day, I had a manager who would time me everything I did, right? So when I went to the washroom, he would time me. When I'd wander away, whether I'm going for lunch or whether I'm just picking up some papers or I'm going to see someone else in a cubicle, he would often time me, and it was just the weirdest thing. It's just a very odd thing about control. And then it was a very difficult thing to deal with. And so how did I manage that? Well, eventually I just said, look, I noticed you keep timing me. I notice also you go out for a smoke break every hour, but I don't time you. And I just said, how would you like it if your boss is timing you on that? And then he got really defensive. Oh, well, I'm allowed my mandatory hour break for smoking, blah blah blah. And I said, sure, and that's fine. I understand, but imagine if someone did that to you, right? So you're always timing me. He's like, yeah, but you take long lunch breaks and you take long bathroom breaks and things like that. I said, okay, fine, I appreciate that, right? And I will try to be on time for those types of things, and I'll do my best to get the work done. But wouldn't you say that? How long is the hourly smoke break? Can you tell me? He's like, well, it's supposed to be 5 minutes. I said, okay. Do you think people do smoke breaks take 5 minutes or they go longer? He's like, well, most of them go longer. I said, yeah, right. What happens? You start talking to somebody, it goes a bit longer, right? I mean, is that a big deal? No. So but the point was that I engaged in a conversation with him to make sure that he understood kind of where I was coming from. I think that's an important thing to understand. We have to be willing to engage in conversation with these people about these things. I think it's important for them to understand kind of how it works. Good morning from Vancouver. Hey, Sarah, good to see you. Like always, people are joining us, and we're talking about managing a manager. Now, has anyone had a very difficult manager to deal with? Comment below. Let me know what you think because I want to hear your story. What was the situation? How did you deal with it? Or maybe you struggle to deal with it. Is there something you struggle with when it comes to a bad manager? How do you manage that? I'll share another story of not necessarily a bad manager, but a challenging manager. Sometimes you have managers where you just don't jive. You don't get each other, right? And so I had one of those in my brand marketing days. And you know, he was a different personality than me. He didn't understand. He was kind of more. He's more of a quiet person, and he didn't understand my jovial ways, and uh, and the way he would do things was different than the way I would do things, and so there was a bit of a clash there in terms of, you know, how we would interact and engage. But you know, like I think ultimately you have to have understanding, like, you know, what are his strengths, what are my strengths, and so, you know, during one of our development sessions, like between him and the two people that work for him, myself included, we had an open discussion about, you know, how things are going, what we're feeling. I said, look, I said, let me just put it out there on the table. Uh, you're different than me, and I think, you know, she or my colleague, she's a bit different too. We all have different styles, so I think it's important for us to understand what are the different styles. So, and I said, here's what I like about you, okay, and and then I said, here's what I do that I think maybe clashes with you, or maybe you don't understand. And so, you know, let's get that out on the table, because for me, I wanted to make sure that we had that conversation about doing that, because once you understand how each of you operate, then you can actually have a better understanding of, you know, how to work together. Because every single person is different. We all have different personalities. We all have different leadership styles. We all have different behavioral styles. That emotional intelligence piece varies between each of us. We all have different levels of empathy, and so it's important for us to understand that first, and then get out there and put everything on the table. Because and then set it to the goal, because the goal is, look, I want all of us to work better, more efficiently, and respect each other's differences and leverage each other's strengths and take our team to that next level. If you agree with that, then let's work together to figure that stuff out. That's why organizations, and you know, when I go to organizations to do employee engagement stuff, talking about culture, talking about personality assessments, doing leadership profiles and styles. That's why it's so important to do this, because people don't really recognize that, or they don't understand how their interactions affect other people and how other people's interactions affect them. And so it's important for us to, you know, create a system, or create a better understanding of the stuff, so that, you know, organizations and teams and cultures can thrive. That's why we talk about these managers. And look, and the truth is, there are going to be bad managers, and some that are really, really bad. But for the most part, you know, if you start with that attitude that, look, we just don't understand each other, and we need to do better as a team and for the organization, that's coming from a good place. You know, one of the best ways to get your manager on board is to always bring it back to the team's goal, the directives, right? Do we want to make more money for the team? Do we want to hit our goals? Do we want to reach our sales targets? Yes, yes, yes. The other way to do it is to align with the company's values. Our company's value is about respect and honesty. Do we want to live those values? If we do, then let's have this conversation. And one way that I would do that is, you know, going out for lunch, getting away from the office place, because the office adds a formality and a hierarchy that often can, you know, throw you off, right? It can kind of get in the way. Now, some people are commenting here. So Gina's saying getting into the weeds about timing might not be a good route for all managers. Maybe do a 5 why session on the person timing you. Yeah, good point. You know, I didn't want to get into the weeds. I wanted to get into the general philosophy. Or you set aside a discussion for later, so they're not so defensive. That's a great point. Gina also says, Ryan, we can be different and still be successful together. Diversity is more successful than homogenous teams. Absolutely, absolutely. And look, Kenny's here. Awesome. Kenny's here from Sugar Land, Texas, just southwest of Houston. Saying hello, good to see you again. Yeah, you know, I'm trying to be better about being more consistent with my posts. So as you saw from my latest, here, I'll show it to you again because it's kind of cool. My latest, see this thing? See that beautiful thing there? That's basically telling you that I'm committing to coming on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 8:45 a.m. Right? So that's kind of my plan. Hope you like that. All right, there we go. And back I am. So I kind of like doing that. So we're talking about how to manage your manager, how to deal with good, bad, and toxic bosses. And I'm inviting you to share your stories about a manager you've had to deal with. Comment below. Let me know where you're from. Let me know what your thoughts are on dealing with good and bad managers. So I've shared a couple stories of some of my bad managers. Let's talk about good managers, and let me be very upfront, okay? So I did several years in engineering. I did several years in brand marketing, and I can tell you that I struggled to have good managers. Or, you know, the other argument could be that I struggled to have a good fit with managers. When I was working at Unilever, my manager, I thought she would be amazing for me, and she was so smart and so talented, And I think that one of the things I liked about her was that her strengths were going to help me, and her weaknesses I had strength in. Right? I was like, oh, this is such a great marriage, of the two of us. So I was super excited to start. What happened? Like literally a week later, she got promoted and moved somewhere else, and I was left in the dust with a new manager. Because for me, one of the most important things for when you look for a job is, who is my manager, right? Do we gel? Are they going to champion support me? Because the best managers champion support the individuals. They don't fear that, oh, they're going to make they look so amazing and they make me look bad. What the worst thing is to have a manager who doesn't champion you, doesn't support you, is a gatekeeper, is afraid of your success, takes credit for your work. And that's the type of stuff that you don't want. And I had that type of gatekeeper boss who, wouldn't let me have any access to his manager, and would say things, that were not true about me to his manager. And I was like, this is really, and I didn't know, of course, because how would I? He was a gatekeeper to that information. I had no idea what was going on until I found out later on. So it's been hard to have a good manager. But when I was at Unilever, that manager, she seemed amazing, but then she left. I was like, oh, bummer. So they brought another manager. Now, this manager, the new one I had, she was a rock star in the organization, and people loved her, and she was really good and smart. But the challenge was when I looked at what she wanted and how I was, her strengths were also my strengths, and her weaknesses were my weaknesses. And so what happened was, because she was so strong in my strengths, she basically had my abilities, but she was even more seasoned. And so I wasn't able to gel with her in a way where I could support her and be a complementary team member. I had to go to the other areas which were my weaknesses and try to strengthen them. But it was harder to make that. And then at a certain point, we just didn't gel as much. So I think that's great. Ken says, of course, we love this topic. Good. I'm glad you like this topic. So if you're liking this topic, tag other people, comment below. Let me know your thoughts on dealing with a good boss, a bad boss, how to manage it. Give me your thoughts and share your stories on some different bosses that you've had. And so I was saying before how I've never had very many good bosses. So in engineering, so I had 3 or 4 bosses. I would say out of all of them, I never really had one that I felt comfortable with or that I gelled with. Either it was a personality thing, or it was a fit thing, or it was an engineering thing. I'm not sure what it was, but I never found one that, because what I always wanted was, because I saw other people with their managers. So the ones I admired or was jealous of was like one of my friends, his manager, they were buddies. They would go out for lunch, every week, and they'd often hang out after work sometimes, or meet up on the weekends, they'd invite to each other's Christmas parties, like that type of thing. It's like, whoa, like that's amazing. I almost never had that. Actually, that first boss I had, remember that one I had for a week? Yeah, she invited me to her Christmas party. That was great. Like, that's the type of person I wanted. And so, I was jealous of having that kind of manager, because I want to be friends with. I don't want to just have a professional relationship and just have boss employee. I wanted to be friends with this person. And it's not like they were super much older than me. Some of them were the same age, but I wanted to have that ability to be friends with them. And number 2, I wanted them to champion support my growth, because ultimately I wanted to leave. And so one of the things that happened in and then when I went to brand marketing, the first boss came in and we just didn't gel. He was a very different personality. The second boss came in and he was super, hustle. But he kind of did it in a way that was kind of mean, which didn't gel with my power connection, kind of, nice empathy way. So that also was a bit difficult. But he gave me a lot of great support in terms of helping me do better storytelling and helping me better with delivering results in the organization. So he was someone I definitely still agreed with. His manager, my director, she was really difficult, because one of the things that she did that I found really difficult was that she never let anyone talk to her or set up meetings with her. And she would actually go to different cubicles with certain people, showing favoritism, and then with other people like myself and a few others, never talking to us. And that, of course, made us feel, disconnected, not part of the team, not supported. And so those are things that, can challenge you, and it becomes part of the culture. Now here's Paul. Paul says, I've had bosses that were totally closed to new ideas, only interested in working with hard, set, outdated concepts, not a good for an organization at all. Yeah, like, so how do you get a manager that is completely like, let's call them a dinosaur, and try to move them a certain way? And I think that's really difficult. Actually, it is difficult. I have a story about that one too. So when I was working on one of my books, my GMAT book, one of the managers, they were stuck in, like, they were like a dinosaur. They weren't actually thinking about, being getting new. So we're working on the second edition of our GMAT book, right? So I wrote a GMAT book called Barron's GMAT, and this was about maybe let's say about 5 years ago, 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. Anyway, no, sorry, maybe 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Anyway, so we're doing this book, and me and my co-author were like, okay, so what are we gonna do? We need to put together an online test and people like that. And they were like, well, we want to keep the CD-ROM we made last time 10 years ago. I'm like, a CD-ROM? Like, what are you talking about? Like, I said, and so most laptops, I said in the call, I said most laptops don't even have a DVD-ROM drive anymore. Like, you need to have an online downloadable test both for a laptop and a mobile. That's what you need. CD-ROMs, like, who the heck does that? And they were like, oh, but it's very expensive, and they just like completely were not into it. And so what I do, I had to convince them. So I went through and I found as much data as I could on what the target demographic was, what they care about, laptops, computers, tech, and I made a case, like, with the data and my own knowledge and my partner and my team, my co-author's knowledge about, look, the trends are the people who do GMAT are this age. Here's the data that tells you what they focus. They 64% spend their time on their mobile. They do online tests. They don't want in-book tests. They don't want CD-ROMs. I don't think we should do this. We need to invest time in developing an online test. And it took 3 months, 3 months of discussions and getting other people on board and talking to experts, but they finally agreed to have the online test, which was hilarious. So now, what's the point there? Like, you have to really fight for the things that are important to you, and make sure it's backed up with data and case studies and support from cross-functional teams, and then you can start making your case. All right, more comments. Kenneth says, some people just don't want to be friends with you unless you agree with their ways of thinking. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I don't want to be friends with every manager, but it would have felt good if I had at least one who was good, or at least try to be civil, or try to find ways to be collegial with each other, right? I think that's an important piece. If I'm working with, when I work with people, like, for example, the ones on my DYPB team, they all have different personalities, right, and different styles. But I try my best to be collegial, warm, supportive as much as I can. So even if you can't be friends, you can still be supportive, warm, championing, all that kind of stuff. You can do those things, which I think is important. Let's see what else here. Gina says, sometimes it's so hard. They're so hardwired in their ways. It's better to start looking elsewhere for a more progressive environment. That's a great point, Gina. So one of the things I'll tell you is that when you're dealing with a bad boss, let's say a really toxic boss, here are the things. So let's talk about that. How do we deal with a toxic boss? Let's say they're bullying you, or they're taking credit for your work, or they're working like a dog, and you're not like getting any sort of flexibility. They're not really listening to your needs, whatever they might be. How do you deal with that kind of boss? So the general idea, of course, is the three-pronged philosophy, which is either you can change your situation, you can accept your situation, or you can exit your situation. So you try to change it, but if it doesn't work, you can accept it, whether it's temporarily or for a year or two, or you can exit right away. Now, if it gets really bad, most people will temporarily accept it and then look for another job and then eventually exit. And I think that's a totally fine thing. I mean, the truth is, if you have a toxic boss that doesn't champion you, doesn't support you, and doesn't, it's a gatekeeper, and you need to leave as soon as possible. Like, you need to get out. Get out. Run away as fast as you can. I'm not saying quit your job, but you need to leave. That is so important. Okay. Now, but let's go back to the first part, which is, how do we change the situation? So there are certain things. There's certain things that you can do, and there's probably, in my mind, there's 4 things that I would do when it comes to trying to change a toxic boss, a stiff boss, one that's hardwired in a certain way, and that type of thing. Any sort of negativity there. You have to know the systems that you have in place. So number one, of course, you have your cross-functional teams, right? So they can offer a lot of support with different things. You can even talk to their manager if you want, but you have to be careful about that and treading over that, but keeping it private. But talking to your cross-functional team about, getting some insight on what they think, and maybe they'll give you some perspective that either helps you understand them better or it gives you some support around what you're trying to do. So I think that, so one good example of where that happened to me was when I was working in corporate. They had our yearly reviews, right? And one of the things that happened to me was we had they talk about your strengths, your weaknesses, or your development plans. And my boss came to me and said, "Well, your weakness is this." And I was like, and he said it was drive for results is a weakness. I'm like, "Are you kidding me? I'm not driven for results. What does that even mean? How can you say that?" I said, "What?" And I told him, I said, "What does the cross-functional team say?" And then he pulled up the cross-functional feedback. Bobby is perseverant, driven. Bobby is driven. Bobby is a people guy. Bobby is driven. Bobby is he's hardworking. He's driven. I said that all the cross-functional say I'm driven. How can you say I'm not driven? And he's like, "Well, that's just how I feel." I said, "Okay, well, maybe you need to listen to the cross-functional feedback and better understand that, or maybe understand more about what's going on with me." And that was a very difficult, but using my cross-functional feedback and my support team, it helped me better understand that, this is just politics, and I had support and validation that yes, I was a hard worker. I had, and here's where the funny part was. He put on my development plan that my weakness was drive for results, but my strength was perseverance. And I was like, I don't get it. How can you do both those things? It doesn't make any sense to me. But whatever. Having the cross-functional support and talk to people gave me a lot of validation for what I was doing. So that's one. The second thing you do, of course, you can talk to HR. Now, HR often is called the Senate in some organizations, but some places HR is great, other places it's terrible. But HR is a place for you to document how you're feeling, what you're going through, talking about and you basically talk about, here's what they said, here's what they did, here's how it made me feel, and document that stuff. And on the note of documentation, it is so important if you want to manage your manager, you have to document how things are going. Because trust me, your manager is documenting everything about you, good and bad. HR is documenting everything against you, good and bad. So it's important for you to document your own stuff. And that's actually what one of my second boss at Kraft told me, who, again, he was a bit of a hustler and but a bit different than I was, but he gave me great advice. He said, you should document everything you've done. So whenever it comes out that you didn't do this, you didn't do that, you have it laid out here on a page. I was like, okay, so I put together a page of here's the things that I've been doing and what I've accomplished, my achievements. And that was a really good lesson, because you need to document everything you're working on, because trust me, in the corporate space, they are documenting stuff against you all the time, just in case. I mean, that you may be there for 10 years, but they still document everything about you. And I know that because I've seen that from other people who have left there for 8, 10, 14 years, what's kind of gone on with them. So that to me is another aspect. We're talking about how to deal with, and so now that's a second way to how to change your boss, or deal with your boss. The other two ways go back to number one is having knowing the objectives and goals of the organization, of the team, and of your manager. Those things are really, really important, because you can then come to them by talking about those things. Our goal is this, and I think this task that you have me doing doesn't meet that goal or objective. What I think is better is this task that will meet that goal or objective. And do you want to have and I estimated a 3% growth versus a 1% growth. Do you want 3% growth or 1% growth? What's important to you? Like, so now I'm talking to them on areas that they understand. They want growth, they want that success, they want that result. So by doing that and talking about the goals and objectives of either the organization or the team or the unit or the manager, you can potentially persuade them. And then the fourth way, and this is where we go about toxicity, is talking about values. If the organization values respect and communication and honesty, integrity, all those types of things, then you need to call them out and say, look, we are not living and adhering to our values, either as a manager, because a manager shouldn't do this, or as an employee, I feel like this, and that goes against the values of the organization. And so I think that's an issue. And that's something you can tell the manager, something you can tell HR, as you're making that case. Because at the end of the day, it's a great way to deal with the situation. Always go to the objectives, goals, and results required of the organization, and always go to the values of the organization. Because they can't argue with that. They can't say, well, no, I don't want to meet that goal. They can't argue, well, I don't want to adhere to that value. They can't argue with that. So it's a leveraging point for you. Ken says some bosses are just plain a-holes. Okay, well, the smoker guy, the smoker one I talked about earlier, I would definitely categorize him in that category. A lot of people didn't like this guy. He was very rough and abrasive. But most of them, honestly, they just have their way of doing things. So it's important for us to understand. So now that said, I was talking about how to actually deal with a difficult, challenging boss. You can't just confront them right away. So the way to do it is, you could talk to HR and say, listen, I'm having this situation. I'm going to set up a meeting with my boss in the future to have a courageous conversation. I'm going to do one by myself, but if it doesn't go well, I'd like for you to be part of that as well. Or do you think, or if the situation is really toxic enough, you can say, I'd like HR to be there to witness this exchange. And yeah, of course, your boss is going to be on their best behavior, but if they're really that bad, and you talk about those things, you can start laying out. Here are the 5 different things you did. Here's what you did. Here's how it made me feel, and here's why I think it goes against the objectives and goals of the team and the values of the organization. Here's another thing that happened, and you lay it all out. And the HR person's there, and it's great. If not, again, what you can do is set a courageous conversation with your boss. Say, listen, I need to have. I'd like to set up. So you take control of the situation. Say, I'd like to set a meeting with you to talk about my progress and some challenges that I'm having, both in terms of the work I'm doing, but also in terms of our interaction. Can we set something up next week? And so that way they're more prepared for it. They're not defensive. They're more open to the conversation. And you set the stage for having more open conversation. I want to have an honest conversation about stuff. And then when you do that, then it's going to be better. But then you make sure you prepare the work you've been doing. Prepare again, going back to here's what you did. Here's how it made me feel. Here's what I think we can do about it. And then after you've laid that stuff out, then listen to them. I'd like to hear your take. And don't do all 5 at once. Just say, I've got a couple of things, but here's the first one. So the first one is, when we finished that project and you sent a note to the vice president about what you've done, you mentioned he gave you kudos and praise, and then you didn't respond back, letting you know that, I did a lot of the work. And when you did that, that made me feel disconnected and unappreciated. And I think it'd be a good idea to mention that in an email, or at least mention it publicly, or at least mention in a way where I'm CC, so I know that's going on. What do you think about that? And then let them talk. And part of it is to let them talk, and you have to listen, right? I mean, if they're going to listen to you, you have to listen to them. And you do that one at a time. So these are tactics you could use to deal with a boss and manage a boss, particularly one that's really difficult or toxic and things like that. And if anyone else has suggestions, comment below. Let me know what you think. How would you deal with a toxic boss? Have you had a story where you've dealt with a boss that's been difficult? I'd love to hear your stories about that. And let's see, Ken says, then your boss is onto you if you do this. Then what? You can make things a living hell for you. Well, I mean, here's the thing. That's a great point. But there's a certain point where you have to decide how much am I willing to take from the toxicity that they're already doing, right? And ultimately, you have to make that call to change things for the better. You could certainly write up, but do you want to stay in that situation for 10 years? Or do you want to try to make an attempt? And if it doesn't work, then work on the temporary acceptance and then the exit of the organization, or moving to a different desk. Because if it doesn't work out, then that's what you need to do. So when it didn't work out for me in my first brand marketing job, I was like, okay, you know what? I've tried to change the situation. It's not working. I was even told it wasn't going to change. I tried to accept it, but then I realized, I need to leave. And so I made a plan to exit, and it took about 6 months, but then I exited. I exited on positive terms, and that's fine. That's something that people have to do. You have to make the call whether you want to take. Sure, okay, fine. You're saying the abuse is at 40%, and if I deal with it or I bring it up, it's going to go to 80%. Sure, if that happens, then you have even more right to know your rights, to call an HR, to start to exit. But I think it's better than living in a crappy 40% toxic thing for 10 years. So you have to make that choice, right? You have to make that choice in terms of what you're going to do about that. Okay, that makes sense. All right. Anybody else? Any other questions on good bosses, bad bosses? Again, if you're liking what you're hearing, tag us below, comment, like, heart. You can certainly tag people and share questions. I'd like to hear your stories about bad bosses and things like that. And I haven't even talked about a good boss. So let me talk about a good boss. So again, in my life, they've been rare. But I did have a really good boss for this program I worked, which was on youth leadership. And she was amazing. She would have daily meetings with her team, which again, okay, that's really rare. A daily meeting with her team to talk about, and she was so organized. She would not talk about what was happening today. She would talk about or tomorrow. She would talk about what's happening 2 days from now. So she'd already had a meeting with us to talk about today and tomorrow. We were talking about the third day, and I was like, wow, that's so organized. She listened to everyone's take. Okay, what do you think, Bobby? What do you think, Susan? What do you think, Mary? What do you think, Bill? She then gave her take on things and said, okay, and then lay the direction for the plan for 2 days from now, as well as, okay, and a quick 2-minute roundup of what we're doing today. We're all good. Any questions? I thought that was amazing. And then she'd have meetings with me individually to see how I'm doing, to make sure I'm feeling supported and championed. She was really honest with her feedback when she gave in my development, when she gave my weaknesses and my strengths. She was very honest about, here's what I think your strength is or weaknesses. Here's an example where I saw it, okay? And here's how I think we can help with that. What do you think? And then she listened to me. Wow, that was amazing. It was actually foreign to me. I didn't even know how to deal with it because it was so nurturing, supportive, and just really great as a boss to have someone like that. And let me give you some other tips on managing your manager. So here's a really funny story with my vice president. So he was 3 levels above me, and whenever we had a meeting with the vice president, we're to deliver some major presentation on our business. He was extremely. He was really interesting because he would dive into the weeds on things that were not that significant, or he'd have a mindset about things that are like, no, the things is not. And we had to really have our data with us, so we had to manage him really well. And he would take the decks and read ahead. And so, how do we manage him? Well, we said, well, number one, we wouldn't give him the deck because he would always want the deck. And no, we're not going to give the deck because you typically read ahead. And he's like, okay, fine. We want you to really hear us. And we also said, and we also tried to make sure he'd always go on his BlackBerry. And so one of the things we did, as soon as he, and we all said this, as soon as he goes to BlackBerry, we just pause. We're going to pause for a BlackBerry moment. And we paused. And this is funny because several people in the room were doing this, to pause and making note of the fact that he was on his BlackBerry again. So we said, we'll wait till you're done. Okay, now let's get back to this presentation. And then the other thing we did was that whenever he had these questions or these segues into these nothing burger issues, we'd have data to say, you know what, here's the data on this one. That's why that doesn't work. But we can talk about it in a separate meeting. Let's go back to the main focus, which is this, because we want to get a decision from you. And so, and that's how we manage him. And you know what? He hated it. He hated it first. So one of the things that happened was he actually said, I hate this, but I recognize what's going on here and why, and I totally get it. So he said, so he promised to be better, and he said, moving forward, can I please have at least a paper deck when you show up? And I will stop using my BlackBerry. I'll put it away. I said, okay, great. And so that was a way for us to manage that manager. So and I think it's an important skill to have to be able to manage your manager, because you have to use the skills you have to complement them and leverage their strengths to help support you and try to make sure that they're supporting you as best you can. So so I think that's my topic for today. If anybody has any other questions or things they want to share, you can comment below. You can ask questions. I'll continue to still answer questions around how to manage managers, good and bad and toxic. If you have other things you want to say or you want to talk to people in the feed, please do. I'd love to hear more from your stories on bad bosses, good bosses, how you leveraged a boss who championed supports you, how you dealt with a boss that wasn't that way. I'm glad to have you join the conversation. This is the Power of Connection broadcast. I'm here every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 8:45 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. You're welcome to join me anytime to share your thoughts. And I see Cindy already saying, "My manager is me." Well, yeah. I mean, if you're sure, but let me ask you, Cindy, what part of you is good, what part of you is bad as a manager. Because I manage myself too as being an entrepreneur. I know what parts are bad about me and what parts are good about me. But talking to clients, talking to people that you might work with, you're still kind of in a managerial role. So it's good to get feedback from them to see how they see you and how they perceive you. Okay, so again, if you're joining, thanks so much for joining us. I'll see you on Monday, and by all means, check out my links below if you want more support with employee engagement, personal branding, or speaking. And you can also check out my company page, which is also Bob Umar Training and Speaking. Check that out as well. I post up there every day, and I'd love to see if you check out that stuff as well. I'm also in the middle of my 10 tips, 10 day series on how to build a powerful thought leadership personal brand. I'm now I finished day 8, and we'll be doing day 9 very soon. You can check that out on my LinkedIn company page. And one last announcement: I'm doing there's going to be a Toronto LinkedIn local meetup. Our 15th so far over 2 years. Our last one of the year on November 21st. It's going to be about gratitude, reflection, and planning, and featuring some amazing speakers like Blake Flyshacker, Fatima Zaidi, and Swish Goswami. So if you're there, come check it out. Looking forward to seeing you. All right, thanks so much for all the love and support, and I will see you guys soon. Take care. Talk soon.